The lights don't flicker first. That's the myth. In a true high-altitude electromagnetic pulse event, the grid does not fade like a storm rolling in. Stops. One moment your refrigerator hums, data flows invisibly through fiber lines, substations regulate voltage across thousands of miles, and hospitals pulse with electronic precision. The next moment, silence. Not darkness alone, but systemic silence. Transformers seize. Protective relays misfire. Vehicles stall mid-intersection. Air traffic control screens go black. And what follows is not cinematic chaos. It is engineered fragility revealing itself all at once. The danger is not the flash in the sky. It is the dependency beneath your feet. Modern civilization is a synchronized electrical organism built on long transmission lines, high-voltage transformers, supervisory control systems, and time-sensitive digital infrastructure. An electromagnetic pulse, whether generated by a high-altitude nuclear detonation or a severe geomagnetic storm driven by solar activity, induces rapid surges in conductive materials. Long conductors such as power lines act as antennas, channeling induced currents directly into transformers and grid infrastructure. The first wave of an EMP, known as the E1 component, is a fast, high-intensity burst capable of disrupting microelectronics. The second wave, E2, resembles lightning but compounds the problem when protection systems are already compromised. The third component, E3, is slower and more insidious, mimicking geomagnetic disturbances that saturate transformer cores and cause thermal failure. The public imagination focuses on the flash. The engineering community fears the slow burn of E3. The misunderstanding begins with Hollywood imagery. Many believe only nuclear war can generate a disabling EMP. In reality, the physics of geomagnetic storms has already demonstrated grid vulnerability. In 1989, a solar storm collapsed Quebec's power grid within minutes, leaving millions without electricity. In 1859, the Carrington event induced currents so strong that telegraph lines sparked and caught fire. Today's infrastructure is exponentially more complex and fragile. Microprocessors control substations. Water treatment plants rely on automated pumps. Fuel distribution depends on electrically powered transfer stations. The misconception is that backup generators solve everything. Generators require fuel. Fuel requires pumping stations. Pumping stations require electricity. The dependency chain loops back to the grid. The hidden science lies in scale and timing. Large power transformers are not mass-produced items sitting in warehouses. They are custom-built, often overseas, with manufacturing lead times that can extend from 12 to 24 months under normal conditions. A geomagnetic disturbance that overheats transformer cores does not cause visible explosions across every station. It silently degrades insulation, shortens lifespan, and triggers cascading failures hours or days later. The critical point is that grid recovery is not a switch that can simply be flipped back on. If multiple high-voltage transformers fail simultaneously, replacement becomes a logistical marathon under conditions where transport networks and communication systems are already compromised. Evidence for this vulnerability is not speculative. The North American Electric Reliability Corporation has repeatedly studied geomagnetic disturbance scenarios. The Department of Homeland Security has conducted resilience assessments. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission has mandated improved standards for monitoring geomagnetically induced currents. These are not signs of hysteria. They are acknowledgments of systemic risk. Engineers calculate induced current thresholds that saturate transformer cores. They measure harmonics generated during GIC events. They simulate cascading failures under load stress. The data reveals a sobering reality. Resilience is improving, but exposure remains. The survival implications begin at the household level and expand outward. Water stops flowing when pressure drops below threshold because electric pumps fail. Wastewater treatment halts, creating sanitation risks within days. Grocery stores operate on just-in-time supply chains that depend on refrigerated transport and digital inventory management. Without power, perishable food spoils rapidly. ATMs fail. Payment systems halt. Fuel pumps require electricity to function. Communication networks rely on cell towers with limited battery backup, often only a few hours. The first 72 hours determine whether communities stabilize or fragment. Escalation occurs not because people panic irrationally, but because systems designed for continuous power are forced into manual mode without training or redundancy. Traffic signals fail, increasing accidents and blocking emergency response routes. Hospitals switch to generator power, but diesel reserves typically last days, not weeks. Law enforcement faces communication breakdowns. Urban density magnifies every disruption. In rural regions, isolation becomes the dominant risk as supply chains fail to reach remote populations. The crisis evolves from electrical failure to water insecurity, from water insecurity to public health stress, from public health stress to social strain. Transition begins with a hard truth. Preparation is not about bunkers or apocalyptic fantasies. It is about understanding systems. The secret they do not emphasize in public messaging is that resilience depends less on dramatic gear and more on infrastructure literacy. Knowing how water is pumped into your neighborhood matters. Understanding where substations sit relative to your location matters. Recognizing that refrigeration is a luxury of stability changes how you store food. Preparation is not fear-driven. It is systems-driven. The next danger unfolds quietly. Communications blackout. When power fails, fiber optic cables may remain intact, but routers, switches, and servers do not operate without electricity. Data centers have backup systems, yet fuel logistics constrain duration. Satellite communication remains possible, but consumer access is limited. Radio frequencies become the backbone of situational awareness. The analysis here reveals that information scarcity amplifies risk. In emergencies, rumor spreads faster than fact. Without reliable channels, communities make decisions based on incomplete data. A common misunderstanding is that smartphones alone provide resilience. They do not. They are endpoints dependent on towers, backhaul links, DNS servers, and power. The hidden science involves electromagnetic shielding and Faraday principles. A properly constructed conductive enclosure can attenuate high-frequency electromagnetic energy, protecting sensitive electronics from E1 pulse effects. However, not all metal containers are equal. Gaps, seams, and grounding errors reduce effectiveness. Shielding is about continuous conductive surfaces and minimizing apertures relative to wavelength. Evidence from laboratory testing shows that properly sealed enclosures significantly reduce field strength penetration. Survival implication. Protecting a small set of critical electronics, battery-powered radios, solar charge controllers, spare inverters, can preserve communication and limited power generation capability after the event. Escalation intensifies when fuel scarcity intersects with communication breakdown. Gasoline degrades over time. Diesel can suffer microbial contamination. Without stabilizers and rotation planning, stored fuel becomes unusable precisely when needed most. The transition from electrical outage to logistical paralysis can occur within days. Water becomes the defining variable. Municipal systems rely on electrically driven pumps to maintain pressure and move water from treatment facilities into distribution networks. Gravity-fed systems offer partial resilience, but treatment chemicals require supply chains. The danger is not dehydration on day 1, it is contamination on day 3. Stagnant pipes allow bacterial growth. Boil advisories become impossible when households lack fuel. Analysis reveals that water purification science is both simple and frequently misunderstood. Boiling kills pathogens but requires sustained heat. Chemical disinfection with chlorine or iodine requires correct dosing and contact time. Filtration removes particulates and many microorganisms, yet viruses require finer membranes or combination methods. The hidden principle is redundancy. Mechanical filtration paired with chemical disinfection dramatically increases safety. Evidence from emergency response operations consistently shows that layered treatment reduces disease outbreaks. Survival implication. Water storage is finite. Purification capability is renewable. Escalation emerges in urban environments where population density overwhelms local resources. In high-rise buildings, water pressure depends on electric booster pumps. Without them, upper floors lose access first. Elevators stop. Elderly residents become trapped. Medical devices dependent on home electricity cease functioning. The event shifts from infrastructure failure to humanitarian crisis. Transition now leads to food systems. Modern agriculture is energy-intensive. Irrigation pumps run on electricity or diesel. Fertilizer production relies on natural gas. Harvesting, processing, refrigeration, and distribution depend on synchronized logistics. Grocery stores typically maintain only days of inventory. The misunderstanding is that rural proximity guarantees food access. Farms produce bulk commodities, not ready-to-eat supplies. Processing plants require power. The hidden science of caloric density matters here. Staple grains store efficiently because of low moisture content. Proteins spoil quickly without refrigeration. refrigeration. Evidence from disaster response reveals that communities with pre-positioned shelf-stable staples endure significantly longer without resupply. Survival implication. Caloric planning must consider macronutrient balance, storage conditions, and preparation fuel requirements. Escalation intensifies as refrigeration fails across the supply chain. Food waste skyrockets within 48 hours. Transition from fresh to shelf-stable consumption becomes abrupt. Cooking fuel emerges as a limiting factor. Propane stores well but requires safe ventilation. Wood burning requires dry fuel and introduces carbon monoxide risk. The hidden principle is energy conversion efficiency. Pressure cookers reduce fuel consumption by accelerating heat transfer and raising boiling points. Evidence from off-grid communities demonstrates fuel savings up to 50% under controlled cooking methods. The narrative tightens as health systems strain. Insulin requires refrigeration. Dialysis requires electricity and purified water. Hospital ventilators require uninterrupted power. Backup generators mitigate short-term outages but depend on diesel logistics. Analysis shows that most healthcare facilities maintain emergency fuel for limited duration, often measured in days. Misunderstanding arises when people assume hospitals are indefinitely self-sustaining. The hidden science is that generator maintenance cycles and fuel contamination risks increase under continuous operation. Evidence from hurricane responses demonstrates that prolonged outages force patient evacuation. Survival implication. Individuals dependent on electrically powered medical devices must develop contingency plans that include battery backups, alternative facilities, and prioritized evacuation routes. Escalation continues as waste management halts. Garbage collection requires fuel and labor coordination. Without regular removal, urban sanitation degrades rapidly. Rodent populations expand. Disease vectors multiply. The transition from inconvenience to epidemiological risk can occur in under 2 weeks in dense areas. Through all of this, the central truth remains unspoken in daily life. Electricity is not merely convenience, it is structural stability. Grid-down conditions expose hidden dependencies that most citizens never examine. Preparation, therefore, must be systematic rather than sensational. It begins with energy diversification, water autonomy, communication redundancy, and community coordination. The next layer of danger moves beyond immediate outage into prolonged recovery uncertainty. If transformer damage is extensive, restoration timelines extend unpredictably. Mutual aid agreements between utilities function only when unaffected regions can supply equipment and personnel. A widespread geomagnetic event reduces that buffer. Analysis indicates that strategic transformer reserves are limited relative to potential simultaneous failures. Misunderstanding persists in the belief that restoration speed mirrors storm recovery. The hidden science is that storm damage is localized and visible. Geomagnetic damage is diffuse and technical. Evidence from grid simulations suggests that black start procedures require functional generation plants and intact transmission corridors. Survival implication. Communities must prepare for the possibility that power returns unevenly and unpredictably, creating patchwork stability zones. Escalation now becomes psychological. Prolonged uncertainty erodes trust. When communication is scarce and restoration timelines are unclear, rumor replaces verified information. Stress responses intensify. The transition from infrastructure crisis to social stress highlights the role of community cohesion as a survival multiplier. At this point, the fundamental question surfaces: what is the first move before grid down, not after? The overlooked principle is pre-event hardening rather than post-event improvisation. Surge protection at the household level reduces vulnerability to voltage spikes, but does not guarantee protection from high-intensity pulses. Shielded storage for critical electronics increases resilience. Water storage measured in days is a baseline. Measured in weeks changes outcome probability. Fuel stabilization extends usability windows. Skill acquisition, basic electrical troubleshooting, water treatment, radio communication, transforms passive consumers into adaptive participants. The escalation is real, but it is measurable, understandable, and survivable with deliberate preparation. The transition forward requires confronting a final misconception that EMP survival is about isolation. It is not. It is about network redundancy. Neighborhood coordination reduces individual burden. Shared water purification capability scales efficiency. Distributed communication nodes maintain information flow.